Okay, thank you, Natalia, and the presenters. So next we have time for the interesting panel discussion. We have 4 different practitioners from the countries where we have been implementing Flow project, and these people have been cooperating with us concretely. So we're very happy to have them join us now for this panel discussion. I will just briefly list your names, and then we will go through an list of introductions, and then I will move on to the set of questions. In the panel we have Katja-Pia Jenu, who works as a labour inspectorate at the Southern Finland Labour Inspectorate. We have Chief Lawyer Liis Naber-Kalm from Estonian Labour Inspectorate, Chief State Inspector Paiba Puku-Kalne from Latvian Labour Inspectorate, and Prosecutor Vladimir Nikolov from the Regional Prosecutor's Office in Bulgaria. Both Katja-Pia and Paiba were with us in Brussels in March for the study visit. And then we've also cooperated with Liis and Vladimir during this project. If you can put on your cameras, and then I will go with the order that is in the slide. So first, Katja-Pia, if you could briefly introduce yourself and the work you are doing. You were also key person in developing the checklist for labour inspectors as part of the investigation tool. Katja-Pia.
Thank you, Annina. My name is Katja-Pia Jenu, and I work as a labour inspector in the Labour Inspectorate for Southern Finland in Helsinki, or I'm based in Helsinki, as Annina said. And I have worked as a labour inspector for 15 years, and the whole time I have specialized in monitoring foreign labour, so these exploitation cases are unfortunately quite familiar to me. Thank you.
Thanks, Liis.
Yeah, hello from my side as well. My name is Liis Naber-Kalm, and I work as a team leader of labor law inspectors in Estonian Labour Inspectorate, but also I am a chief lawyer in Estonian Labour Inspectorate already for 8 years. Let's say, since I lead a team of labor law inspectors, then of course I see the exploitation of foreign labor in my work every day. But it's not only the inspection where we see it, since Estonian Labour Inspectorate is also doing a lot of counseling. Then we see it in counseling cases, plus we see it in labor disputes that the Labor Dispute Committee is solving every day. Thank you.
Thank you, and then Paiba.
Hello, everybody. My name is Paiba Puku-Kalne, and I'm working as head of Riga's Regional State Labour Inspectorate for 10 years. And as well, I'm dealing with the labor exploitation questions for many years as well. That's why I'm here today.
Thank you. And then Vladimir, you are last but not the least. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to see you on this final conference. My name is Vladimir Nikolov, and I'm working as a public prosecutor at the Prosecutor's Office of the Republic of Bulgaria. I have now some 13 years experience as a prosecutor, and prior to becoming a prosecutor, I have 4 years experience as an investigator at police. During all that time, I've dealt with many cases connected with trafficking in human beings. So I'm very proud and very interesting to take part in this Flow project because I find it extremely useful. Thank you.
A lot of expertise in the panel, and I will then move on to the questions. And I first have a question to Katja-Pia. So Katja-Pia, Can you work concretely in uncovering cases of labor exploitation, and some of those cases have amounted to human trafficking for the purpose of forced labor? Can you give us an example of a case you've helped to uncover, and what made you suspect that it was indeed about trafficking and or labor exploitation?
Thank you. I'm going to give you a brief account of the latest case just a couple of months ago. We received an anonymous message to our labor inspectorate about an Asian restaurant in Helsinki, which, according to the message, was just starting up and recruiting chefs into the kitchen. But the chefs would have had to pay about 10,000 euros for the job in order to get to Finland. And Asian restaurants are high on our risk profile because of our previous experiences. So together with the police, we decided to do a joint inspection and to check what is going on. We didn't quite follow Pekka's guidelines in this case, because this was like a trial case, or we just wanted to know what was going on. So there wasn't any surveillance or anything like that done beforehand. But despite that, it was successful because we did find a person working in the kitchen. He didn't have a residence permit at all. So we asked some further questions. And I interviewed this person together with the police officer, and it turned out that he wasn't getting any salary for working in the restaurant. He was still waiting for his residence permit. So like I said, he was working illegally in Finland, but he said that he got some food from the owner, and he was also living in employee's apartment for free. So based on this interview, and then we talked with the employer as well, the police then decided that there were grounds to suspect THB. And then the police started an investigation. Actually, I don't have any or more information how this is now going on, but in any case, we did discover some potential trafficking. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Katja-Pia. If in this example you gave, you concretely cooperated with the police. Do you have what would make your work even easier when it comes to multidisciplinary cooperation? What would you need?
I think this case already, although it was a small case with just one victim, I think it still had some very good qualities. It had the multidisciplinary approach and information sharing, which is very important, because there is a risk that when a message just goes to the labor inspectorate, that it never goes out further to the police. But in this case, we managed to share information. Also, we had like a specialized police unit with us who were concentrating on trafficking issues, because I have witnessed some cases where a person has been working illegally in Finland, and instead of looking further into the case, this person has just been fined for working illegally, and the case has been closed. So in this case, despite the victim working illegally, we looked further into the exploitation side of it. And then the third important thing, which I didn't mention previously, was that the police had already alerted our national victims assistance system. So they knew that there might be some potential victims coming in. And as soon as they opened the investigation, the system was notified, and this victim got assistance from there. Because I agree with what previous speakers were saying, that for the victims of labor exploitation, losing the job is the biggest risk. So they are not, unless they get some sort of monetary assistance, they are not willing to stop the employment, even if it's exploitative. Thank you. But actually, yes, to your actual question, what would make it even better is that I think in Finland we still need even more clear or even clearer guidelines or national referral mechanism and instructions to what labor inspectors should do when they encounter exploitation at the workplace. Now, this was a joint inspection, which is very good, but mainly we do inspections by ourselves, and then we need guidelines on what to do if we see something like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Katja-Pia. You made some very important points that we should take into account. Then I will move on to Liis from Estonia, and I would like to ask from you what kind of cases of labor exploitation and trafficking you encounter at the Estonian Labor Inspectorate. Us in Finland, we're used to cases where Estonians are being exploited in Finland, but what are the current trends in cases that you are seeing in Estonia?
Thank you for the floor. Well, if we talk about labor exploitation, I think in inspection activity and other services that we provide, we see a lot of unpaid wages and over-hour working, and of course, unregistered or illegal work. In that way, Estonia is in an interesting situation because for years we were the sending country of employees, but now we are also a receiving country. So actually, I see that the importance lies on both sides, that we assist those countries who receive our employees, like we cooperate with Norway and Finland really tightly. And also we need to deal with our labor market and the issues of, for example, third country nationals, but also Baltic countries and Polish employees being posted to Estonia. Because for the last 2 years now, already Estonia has been a popular destination for Ukraine and Belarus employees being posted through Polish and Latvian Lithuanian companies, for example. So in that way, we struggle in both ways. I think that the most important part actually, and in that way I agree with the panelists from the last session, the Belgian representative, that since we don't have the mandate about trafficking humans, our main element there is to be the eyes on the field and be the ones who forward the information. And in that way, I can say that for at least a year already, there hasn't been a tip that has been about third country nationals, for example, and their exploitation that we haven't forwarded to police, that they would be in place with all the information that we have. And it's the same about unpaid for wages and let's say the envelope pays. We always forward the information to tax and customs, so that we would be in the same field of information and would have the same information in front of us to find the right targets to go and visit.
Thank you, Liis. You mentioned this cooperation with the police and tax and custom authorities. Do you find the cooperation easy, or is there something that should be done to kind of strengthen it when it comes to then preventing and tackling this labor exploitation issue?
I must say that I'm really happy how well we have developed our cooperation. With years, it has gone better and better. Of course, I can always say that there are things that we can improve. And I think in every cooperation, there are always weak points as well. But the last year, for example, for me, has been a success that more and more information has been exchanged. More and more cases have been dealt together and the information has been shared. A really good example for Estonia was the COVID period, as we can call it, a good period. In that way, for me, that for a month, I had the full view of all the employees coming with special permits from the southern borders to Estonia, because police had to register all the entries. So I saw all the posted workers and I could map for the first time that we are not notified about posted workers as I thought we were. So a cooperation like that also brings out the weak points of our work. But of course, there could be more clear instructions that we would give to our partners and to our inspectors as well, how to cooperate. This is a step to go forward. I think learning from other authorities how to do it, my role model has been Norwegian model, and we do a lot of cooperation with Norwegian A-crime unit. So this is a good example for me how we could develop, for example.
Yes, thank you. We also in Finland are very interested in this Norwegian model where the police, labor inspectors and tax authority works together. Then if we move on to Latvia and to Paiva, so this issue of labor exploitation taking place in Latvia is relatively new phenomenon. What kind of cases does your inspectorate encounter? And what kind of challenges you've identified?
Quite similar as in Estonia, and the state labor inspectorate is dealing with labor exploitation cases which are qualified as labor law violations, and inspectorate is not mandated to initiate criminal proceedings. That's why it's so important to provide effective cooperation with state police, as you talked with Lisa. And so, labor inspectorate planning annual activities takes into account statistical data and pays special attention to the sectors that identify themselves as more dangerous on possible violations. And these sectors have been unchangeable for many years, namely construction, services, manufacturing, and transport. That's why the labor inspectorate devotes resources to inspections of these sectors and purposefully strives to improve the situation as a whole. And the labor exploitation cases facing by the labor inspectorate can divide into several parts. The first to be mentioned situations when labor inspectors carry out inspections and identify labor exploitation risks and inform the state police. The second is a situation when the labor inspectorate receives complaints from individuals regarding possible violations on non-payments of wages, use of vulnerabilities, and so on. And the third one that should be especially emphasized is employment of third country nationals, which has been prevalent in Latvia since 2018, and its size continued to grow until the COVID crisis. And the labor inspectorate faced cases where employers who employed the third country workers did not pay them the earned wages and used various ways to realize it. Workers paid our attention to the fact that in almost all cases, the employer threatened them. If the worker complained to someone, the employer would immediately revoke his work permit, visa, and the foreigner would have to return to his country. And in one case, we received information from the hospital that the foreigner has sought for help because his employer had injured him as a worker refused to continue working without work remuneration. And these cases are particularly complicated because, as I said, workers are imitated and labor inspectorate or other responsible authorities are informed when the employment is terminated, and it's more difficult to obtain evidence. And in these cases, it should be noted that employers try to prepare various documents and deductions and absences and so on. And regarding preventive inspections carried out by inspectorate, situations are often found where foreigners are very well instructed in what to tell to the inspection authorities, and their testimonies are similar, like poems and fairy tales, and they say what employer says, and so. And in these cases, the Labour Inspectorate is the one to identify violations and risks and hand over the information to state police and so on. Yeah, I tried to be very short.
Thank you, Bai, but there was an issue with your sound, but I think most of us were able to hear. Because of the sound issue, I suggest that we move on to Vladimir, but you made some very important points, and I do think that it is very important to give the workers some time to to think about their situation and not to be so, because if you interview them and the employer is there, or they give a story that they have been rehearsed or given by the employer, you don't really get into what is going on beyond on the surface, like we've been trying to do in this flow project. Then if we go to Vladimir, so sorry, my cat is joining the discussion. For Vladimir, I think I will mute you for now. So I will ask the question and then you put the mic on. Bulgaria, the situation is a bit different from the other countries, that you are still seeing more cases of Bulgarians being exploited abroad, and it's still more of a country of origin than a country of destination. But what is the situation in Bulgaria currently, and what kind of cases you encounter as a prosecutor that relate to trafficking for the purpose of forced labor and labor exploitation?
Unfortunately, you are right. Bulgaria is known to be one of the main countries of origin, and Bulgarian citizens supply labor hand for the labor market of the richest countries in Europe. Our victims are mainly trafficked and exploited in Great Britain, Germany, Austria, France, Scandinavian countries, etc. So we do have a real problem with that. But it occurred that we have a new trend. Everybody in this world seeks a better life. Everybody wants to live better, and speaking about experiencing labor rights, wants to receive more money. And right now we see that Bulgaria is an attractive destination, and it becomes a host country for victims of trafficking of labor exploitation from abroad. What do I mean? Bulgarian companies and employers experience a lack of labor hand. And right now they find a cheaper labor hand attracting people mainly from the former Soviet Union countries, which puts Bulgaria in a little bit different situation. We are not used to deal with such cases. Mainly we have victims from Ukraine. During this year, our National Commission for Combating Trafficking in Human Beings, in cooperation with one of our prosecutors' offices, investigated a case of labor exploitation of two citizens of Kyrgyzstan. And which was most interesting, these people were not from poor social background, they were well educated, but they found themselves in a situation of trafficking in human beings and exploitation in Bulgaria. This is, as I said, a new trend, and you can imagine that we have strong bonds and we have a great cooperation within the space of the European Union. So from the point of view of the prosecutor's office, we have many possibilities to use mutual legal assistance, to use joint investigating teams, to use all the mechanisms within the European Union. But when it comes to effectively investigating such a case with some countries from former Soviet Union space, it is pretty much difficult, and we are not so good in this. So as a whole, this is something new. We found something else. This year is unique because of the COVID-19 virus pandemic and the impossibility of many people to travel freely within the European space. Many Bulgarian perpetrators came from abroad. So they came back into Bulgaria, and they started to increase the cases of trafficking for the purpose of labor exploitation in domestic field. So again, this is something new, and we all have to adjust ourselves with that current situation. And it seems that we all have to think of new policies, not only criminal ones, but also social, educational, medical, etc., to cope with this new situation.
Thank you, Vladimir, for pointing out the very interesting new trends and challenges that are a result of this pandemic situation. And thank you also for pointing out some of the ways in which we should tackle this issue. Basically, multidisciplinary cooperation and addressing different aspects is extremely important. Now we can have questions from the chat. There was a question about from a GLA labor and exploitation investigator who said that they have a power to detain and arrest criminals, and they were asking if you have similar powers in your country. I don't think so, but do you think that this would be helpful in your work? That aspect I ask from the labor inspector colleagues. Katja-Pia, maybe you can start.
Well, this is just my personal opinion, but I personally wouldn't like to be arresting anybody or detaining anybody. I'm happy to leave that job to the police. I'm not looking forward to any violence, but of course this means that we would have to have more police officers dealing with these kind of cases than we do at the moment. But hopefully this is now changing at the beginning of next year. Thank you.
Thank you. What about Liis? I can also ask a question have a separate question for you, because somebody in the chat asked about the counseling work that your Estonian Labour Inspectorate does. So maybe you can answer to both questions.
I would maybe start with the first one that Katja-Pia was answering, that I, on the other hand, if I would give my personal opinion, would be really happy to put those people down. But that's my personal opinion. If I take the Labour Inspectorate in a view, then I think that everybody should stay to where they are. And the main key is maybe approaching it multi-authoritatively, that we would cooperate together, but still putting people to jail should stay to the police. But then maybe I should consider cooperating more and more with this team if I like to do it myself. But now about counseling service, yes, Estonian Labour Inspectorate has a big role in counseling in Estonian labour market. We have around 15 counsellors working on phone service, email, and if there is no COVID, then face-to-face counseling every day. and we give guidance in labor law and OSH questions, and also due to questions that are due to posting. And we also have 2 counselors who go to companies to help them with their OSH regulation requirements and give advice how to make their documents okay. So counseling is a huge part of our service that we give. We pile ourselves on 3 pillars, mainly labor inspection activities as controls. Second pillar is counseling, and the third pillar is the labor disputes.
Thank you, Liis. What about then Baiba? Would you like to have the powers to arrest or to investigate labor trafficking cases?
Of course, no, because in Latvia we are dealing with labor law and OSH regulation as well. That's why we have a lot of competencies and duties already. And I'm sure that it is business of police, and it should be so.
Thank you. Then I noticed that there's a question in the chat to Vladimir from the UK. We see a number of Bulgarian victims. What prevention do you have in place in Bulgaria to educate potential victims? Could you say a few words about this?
Of course, as I said, Great Britain is one of the main destination countries for the Bulgarian victims. We do our best. We have a special law for combating trafficking in human beings, and we have a national mechanism and national plan for fighting this phenomenon, not only on the field of criminal measures, but as I said, also as a prevention. We have a special structure including a national commission for combating trafficking in human beings, and these commissions have local commissions in the different regions of Bulgaria. So their responsibilities is not only to intervene in active cases of trafficking in human beings and to help the victims, but also to do the prevention. We try to enter the schools. We try to educate the students, the young people. We also try to intervene in these special minorities groups. In Bulgaria, the main problems with people of Roma origin who live isolated in compact groups, they are unfortunately not well educated, and they very often become victims. So of course we try to do our best. Speaking about trafficking of human beings with the purpose of labor exploitation, I think that we need to improve our connections with the labor inspectorates in Bulgaria, and this is in my opinion one of the main advantages in this whole project, and this is a great added value that we have a special tool which is addressed exactly to these labor inspectorates, and also what can be done to address, of course, these challenges, and that I think not only in Bulgaria but in all our countries we have to work more with the employers, with the companies. We have to build the connections and trust, and to create a culture that does not allow these employees to benefit from exploiting the victims. Thank you.
Thank you so much for pointing out. We are very happy to hear that you find the flow materials useful when it comes to enhancing this cooperation with the Labour Inspectorate, but also the importance of working together with companies. Those aspects are been particular of importance during these 2 years and 3 months that we have been working on implementing in this project and are of very important value for all of us, because none of the actors can solve this difficult issue on their own. I think if we want to be on time, I would already now like to give the floor to Natalia for concluding words. And before that, I just wanted to say that we are going to have a poll to collect your feedback about this webinar. So please answer the poll before you leave. And I really, really want to thank you all the panelists for your insights and important points that you have made. And I wish you good luck in your important work, and really, really hope that we can continue cooperating with you and that you find the materials useful. And if you have any feedback that you get from the field in incorporating and using these materials, please don't hesitate to contact us. We would be happy to hear how these are being used and received by different stakeholders. Thank you. Natalia, are you there?
I am, yes, thank you. Can you see my video now? I'm not sure.
I can't see you. And Anni, can you put on Natalia's slide?
Yes, sure. Just a second.
The poll is now up. So if you go to in your right-hand corner, there's participants, chat, and then there's poll. So please reply to the poll. There's only 3 or actually 4 short questions. Thank you so much. I think this has been a super interesting webinar. I want to thank everybody for participating and all the speakers. I have a kind of a final slide if Anni is able to get it up. Just to wrap up, perhaps a bit more on a theoretical level, what we've been discussing. We've talked about perhaps addressing the fact that we're talking about exploitation having several dimensions. One is this interpersonal dimension, where I think it's important that we all, that all countries basically would acknowledge that labor exploitation is a comprehensive infringement of the rights of individual workers. We see that some countries perhaps still see this more as a kind of perhaps a question of unfair competition or labor infringements, but it's actually an infringement of the rights of individuals. But then there's also this structural dimension that Annina spoke about, and which I think came up in all the presentations today, that it's very much embedded, this exploitation, in structures. And one could even argue, kind of on a theoretical level, that this is a form of state corporate crime, where in a way there's a lack of adequate enforcement. And perhaps one could say that certain mechanisms and structures in society, for instance, supply chains is a good example. Perhaps the free movement of individuals is another example, where this is kind of misused to the economic advantage of certain actors. So in a way, in addition to doing more multi-agency cooperation, I think perhaps on a kind of a macro level, there needs to be more emphasis also on how to prevent the use of existing mechanisms in a kind of a wrong fashion or a wrong way. And therefore, we need not only safeguarding the rights of victims, but we also need to kind of address these kind of structures that in fact facilitate the exploitation. But I think today's discussion was very concrete. I think I've learned a lot about new multidisciplinary models. And I hope that we'll be able to take this forward, at least in the Finnish context, but hopefully also in other countries. That's about it from me now, Annina, if you want to say some final thanks to all participants.
Thank you, Natalia. And I just wanted to also point out that we at Heuni have been working on this issue in addressing and doing research on trafficking for forced labor and labor exploitation for over 10 years now, and we've been lucky to cooperate with different countries and learned a lot during this process, and the level of awareness about this phenomenon has been increasing a lot throughout Europe, and we are seeing more and more countries identify this as a problem, and that their profile is changing from a country of origin to country of transit and country of destination. So therefore it's very important to keep your eyes open and to have different actors who are aware of this problem and can identify different new features and trends, like we've heard today from, for example, from Bulgaria, and also when it comes to Latvia and Estonia, there's been a lot of movement in this topic in the past few years. So it's very important to keep the eyes open to this and to learn from another. So the features of exploitation are very much the same in different countries, like maybe they have slightly different manifestations and how they are perceived by the criminal justice system or different actors, that varies, but the features are often the same. So it's very important to pay respect to this and to acknowledge that this is very much a structural issue. So it has been my great pleasure to have you join us this Final Flow webinar. We are a bit sad that we couldn't go in Tallinn because we love Tallinn, but we're not able to join the Estonian team there. Thank you for taking the time to join us, and like I said, if you have feedback for us about the tools that we've developed or about this webinar, you can also email me or Natalia, or email us however you want. And also, if you would like a hard copy of the investigation tool, we could give you a little Christmas present if you send us a request by email with your address attached. Thank you so much for joining us, and I want to say special thanks to our Flow partners, to Anna Markina and Simone Elma from Estonia, to Lasma Stabinja from Latvia, and for the Bulgarian colleagues Atanas Rusev and Marian and Stefan for your cooperation during this project. And finally, I also want to thank my colleagues at Heuni. So thank you, Anni, thank you, Alexandra, and Anna-Greta, and thank you, Natalia, for making this a great and successful project. We have final reporting for us to keep us busy during this December time. But I wish you all a very nice holiday season, and have a nice weekend. And I hope that we will be able to see each other next year also in same spaces. So let's keep our fingers crossed for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you ever so much indeed. That was wonderful.
Thank you. Bye-bye.